Hey everyone, so now that the new episode of the show I'm co-director and lead writer on is out, which is called Inanimate Insanity, in case you didn't know, I just wanted to do something a bit different for this channel and reflect on the project a little bit, sort of break down what went into telling this story, because I'm really proud of this one. I always like hearing creators talk about their writing process, so hopefully this can give you some fun, analytical, and behind-the-scenes info if you're a fan of the show, and or if you want a little insight if you're interested in telling a story of your own. So I'm going to mainly break it down by focusing on an individual character or set of characters one at a time and their track throughout the episode, and then I'll go over a more broadly overarching structure of the episode at the end. But before I start getting into the writing aspect of the show, I have to first thank Justin Chapman for working out the story with me, as we often enjoy doing, into the wee hours of the night, and him, Adam Katz, and Taylor Grodin, of course, for writing the script with me. We've been working together on Inanimate Insanity for years. I have so much fun cracking jokes and laboring over the most minor of minor details. Like, would baseball as a character really use the word dude? Yeah, he probably would, actually. So, but, let's have Knife call him out for it. Stuff like that. But without further ado, here's my breakdown of the story behind Inanimate Insanity 2, Episode 14, Hatching the Plan. So it actually took a while to figure out how exactly to start this episode. The broader details were locked into place. I knew I wanted it to start immediately after the previous episode, when Fan was eliminated and Test Tube had rather forcibly taken the egg that he'd been watching over away from him, since Test Tube felt that she could take better care of it. We knew that we wanted it to start with Fan and Hotel OJ deciding that there's nothing truly stopping him from going back to the contestant grounds for Egg. And it actually used to be Paintbrush and some of the other Hotel OJ characters, like, talking and giving support to Fan through this, and kind of getting into his mind, hey, maybe you should go back to the contestant grounds and sort of talk this out, because there's nothing stopping you. And I wrote a bunch of drafts of it, and I just never really felt that it worked as a starting point for the episode, and for the life of me, I couldn't figure out why. And then I realized, it's not making sense for Fan's arc, because what I wanted to do with Fan's arc was suggest that he looks at life in a very insular way, and that he enjoys being contained in the shell of the competition, and he's so caught up in his own theories about the show and how it works, and that's all of the world that he sees. Fan projects whatever he wants to see. And he's always talking to himself. And that's his flaw.
Ugh. Stop talking to yourself, Fan.
So, he can't start his journey in this episode by actually listening to input from other characters telling him, oh, it's okay, yeah, go out to the grounds, I think this is the right thing for you to do, and he would listen. No. So that's when I had the idea, on a whim, like, oh, you know what? Let's make it Baxter, right? Let's make it Baxter the crab, and just like Fan projects onto the egg, which doesn't speak, Fan projects onto Baxter, who doesn't speak, and they can both be whatever he wants them to be, and tell him whatever he wants to hear.
You're right! The only barrier separating me from the game is in my mind!
That said, I still wanted Paintbrush to be integral to the scene because, number one, I love that character, and number two, it was very important to me that they stay visible in the show, and that their story isn't over just because they were eliminated from the competition. So for purposes of this scene in isolation, Paintbrush's role is to be the actual conversation with another person that Fan, at the start of his episode 14 arc, is avoiding, the kind of actual communication that he'll grow to have by the end of the episode. But this moment also subtly lays a seed for the future of Paintbrush's story, so stay tuned on that. Also, in regards to character stories not ending just because they were eliminated from the competition, but actually, it makes more sense and it feels appropriate that he's eliminated before he can have this story, since Fan's whole thing is seeing his life as being inside the shell of the game, So he can't really learn the lesson of there being something more out there while he's still in it. He needs to get taken out of it first and forced to confront that change head on. Because last time he wanted to stay in that shell of the competition, and I really want to recall that in the imagery of the nightmare that opens the episode, and also subtly in this little cross dissolve transition to the ship right there. Oh, freeze frame it there, pretty fun. And in parallel, Fan didn't want whatever was inside Egg to hatch out of the shell either. So now in this episode, of course, Fan has to confront all of that change because he's out of the shell of the game. But he runs back to it to try to hold together the shell that hasn't been broken yet, and that's the egg. But then not only is Fan forcibly abducted out of the game again, well, at least he still has Egg, right? Nope, the second of those two shells is broken for Fan when he sees Egg hatch firsthand. And it hatches into these light-based life forms that literally use the shell, but as we see from the other creatures, they move out of their shells at will. And each light orb is its own being, and it's not constricted by the shell. It leaves whenever it wants to. And when Fan is asked point blank who he is without the structure of the show, which is his own personal shell, he says,
I don't know.
But then, as if on cue, Test Tube appears and reminds him that more life is still out there for him outside of that structure. Whether or not Test Tube is in the competition with Fan, she's still there for him. So then Fan is able to self-actualize, say hello to these light orbs inside Egg for the first time, and tell them,
Even without that shell holding you together, you'll still watch out for each other.
just like Test Tube will for Fan. And the parallel cemented by one of the glows turning red for Fan and the other green for Test Tube. And he lets go of Egg. And in the end of the episode, as the sun rises on a new day, Fan finally is able to cope better with newness and change because even if things are changing, him and Test Tube are going to face that change together. And getting more into one of the most major changes in this episode, it's the aliens, right? Led by the Prime Shimmer, of course, the collective ethereal light, speaking on behalf of all of them, which... that was a huge challenge, not only from a design perspective, for sure, but also just from a story perspective, because we had built this up, we knew we wanted to do aliens, we'd laid the groundwork in the second episode of the second season, so this is 2013, right? And we always sort of knew that the way that the aliens would look would be informed by the way that the shell looked, but the really tricky thing was... you don't want to feel like you're jumping the shark with aliens. But also on the other side of the extreme, if you don't go far enough with it, then it's like, well, then why are you doing aliens? You know, like, if you're going to do aliens, do aliens. It needs to feel kind of like it's totally different. It is alien to the characters. So that was a huge creative challenge. But I think it really helped to make it that then they're egg-based and that there is the light essence within them that is sort of animated in a different way than what we've seen before, but still like sort of the exoskeleton of it is reminiscent of an object, so it doesn't feel totally out of realm of what has been seen before, but it is distinct to the point that you're like, oh, okay, this is something different. Shifting back a little earlier into the episode, again, getting more into the characters, I loved finally having the opportunity to give Meepad some extended dialogue scenes, because I was really into writing his subtle little arc in episode 11, Kick the Bucket, when he realizes the turmoil that the competition is putting some of these contestants through, and he goes from trying to stop Marshmallow from leaving to go to the mansion to, at the end, just letting her and realizing this is what she wants to do, and this will make her happy, so she can go. And it's all like it's wordlessly done, and I really liked that. But in this episode, Meephone gets to reveal that he knew that Meepad let Marshmallow leave, and I just really enjoyed getting to see the two of them talk to each other without the contestants around.
If we work together, trust each other, it will be our best chance of survival.
Trust.
Sir?
On the other side of the coin, I was also very happy to see all these remaining contestants in a situation without any hosts or co-hosts around. Because once the challenge is made to be they get Fan back, they leave, Now the contestants are kind of just left on their own. And I really love the dynamic of this ensemble. And what's nice about being down to a final 7 if you count Taco, is that it's more possible to make sure that everyone has a role in the story of some kind. Obviously, the significance of those roles varies, and it's important to have a larger purpose in mind so that you don't just get lost in your ensemble cast and are trying to service all of them without, like, building to anything. The episode has to be focused, and they all have to be working towards a goal, and as usual, it's to win the challenge, but it's a bit more personal than usual since the challenge is to save Fan from an external threat. So you set up the inciting incident with Fan and Egg getting abducted into the spaceship, and then that singular focused event can set everyone in the ensemble in motion and also springboard them into some separate stories.
So let's channel that anger and save him! Who's with me?
Everyone on the ground brings their own perspective to how they feel about Fan being taken, or at least how they're coping with the situation. But importantly, so the episode can be holistic, all of these perspectives are ultimately in service of either supporting Test Tube or helping Test Tube understand that even if she was rightly more qualified in her decision to take care of the egg and take the egg in the last episode, that the method by which she took it from Fan also really matters. But even if they're supporting characters for this specific Test Tube story, I still always want all the characters to feel like they're simultaneously progressing in their own character arcs. So you gotta go with dual purposes for things, right? So for example, Baseball recognizes how on edge that Test Tube is, so he tries a new approach of attempting humor to calm nerves and dull the seriousness of the situation.
This is a new approach for me. This is way too much, I'm sorry.
So he just really wants to fix it. He wants to fix the problem in the same way he expressed that he wants to fix his relationship with Suitcase in the last episode. And originally, Baseball, we had him going to help Suitcase in a more active way, kind of coping with her anxiety, sort of like helping her meditate through one of her hallucinations. And that scene, it went through many, many, many drafts. And it just always felt out of place and off, and we wanted these characters to reconcile meaningfully, Suitcase and Baseball reconcile meaningfully, but we couldn't figure out how to make it feel right. But then I realized one of the things Baseball still needs to learn is that there isn't one big fix. And the way that he was sort of coaching Suitcase through the emotions made it seem like, oh, he suddenly had this knowledge of like, oh, I can help you feel less stressed about everything that's going on. I have the one cure-all solution. And that was just not the right direction. Because what we set up in episode 13 is we have this scene.
With Suitcase, maybe if in the maze I had just mentioned, or on the dock if I had just said something, that things could have changed.
None of those would have fixed it.
There's no one cure-all fix that you're just missing. So then we gotta expand on that in this episode and really bring it home, and he can hear it from Suitcase directly, and that led to then this exchange.
I wish I knew how to fix this.
Baseball, you can't fix it. It doesn't just go away.
And this new thought process allows Baseball to shed some of his personal guilt, which then leads him to his vote for Test Tube, his friend, in the end of the episode.
Nothing personal.
Which are the same words that Suitcase and Nickel used to characterize the bond of their alliance with him. A sentiment that previously kind of upset Baseball, like rocked him to his core, really. But now he's beginning to somewhat understand that's how the game is played, or at least that's how it has to be played. But yeah, that should give you a sense of just how, like, okay, Baseball, he's not the main character in this episode by any means, but there's moves that his arc has to go through that we're going to try to do while accounting for the main story occurring. Also, he jokingly suggests making a big ladder to get up to the ship, and then they actually make one later. And you might think we reverse engineered that gag, but no. It originally started, it was so organic. It started as the one-off gag of him suggesting it. And it wasn't until we literally had been like, oh, let's have the contestants stack up on each other so that Lightbulb could get to the ship and tap it for the electric powers and send it back up so it doesn't fall. And then I gasped in realization, oh, wait a minute, we just did it. This is literally a big ladder. So that was hilarious.
Nice!
Big ladder!
But the main other contestant in the game, besides Test Tube, that we were focusing on this time, was Microphone. And then we knew that we wanted both Test Tube and Microphone out of the competition in this episode, and that both of their arcs had to come to satisfying conclusions. So it only made sense to really have their storylines converge. Because I was worried, like, okay, we got aliens coming in this episode, there's all of this lore, are we going to be able to earn what we want to do with Microphone and Taco here? Because if Microphone ostensibly has the B story of the episode, then the more it can tie into the main thrust of the story that's happening, the better. Because we knew that the end point of the story had to be Mike cutting off ties with Taco and quitting the game. That's what we always wanted. Because Microphone, of course, she's been cheating in the competition, right? She's getting outside help from Taco, and we've always known this is what she needed to do. She needed to be the person to end the deal, ultimately. It was always the vision. And it's not an interesting story if Taco just betrays her, and it's really telegraphed and obvious. She did the same thing last season. And I wasn't interested in them being found out either. Like, this was, like, oddly enough, like, because we didn't really see exactly what people's expectations would be, but the feel I always got was that no one was really thinking that Microphone would, like, sort of develop this conscience and quit, which was always what we wanted, so that was great, because it let us, like, kind of surprise the viewers in a very organic way.
Finally, I can finally...
Is that what you said to Pickle?
So what I've always been really fixated on with Mike throughout this overarching arc for her is keeping her active. Because entering a partnership with another character that's, like, pulling strings and from behind the scenes, that could be a path straight towards Microphone becoming a glorified puppet, right? So Mike is always, throughout the other episodes, we're building this up. She's questioning Taco's methods. But sometimes when she doesn't like what Taco's throwing out there, Mike's coming up with her own ideas. But this is the day that the compromises stop and, like, the partnership just all finally comes to an end. So how do we earn that? So to give that the most focus in the story of Test Tube Saving Fan, you obviously got to tie Microphone and Taco to Test Tube and Fan, right? And one of these ideas for Mike and Test Tube's story correlation, one of them I won't get into since an aspect of the idea might be used for a future episode, but another old one I can actually, I'll break it down for you, and that was doing more with Test Tube noticing Microphone's thievery. Because Taco's been stealing gadgets from Test Tube's lab, right? There was the temporary paralyzer that Microphone was like, oh, we gotta give this back, and Test Tube noticed that, and that's it's a little suspicious. Okay, maybe one, then that's fine. But then now she's noticed the being in possession of the Invisibow last time, because she Test Tube shot one of her darts, and it revealed that Microphone had the bow. So Test Tube's noticed Microphone in the possession now of multiple gadgets, and it's something that it does end up a little bit in the final episode. Test Tube seeing Mike as this thief who's stealing from her. But it used to be a much bigger focus. And Microphone, she was going to be frustrated that Test Tube wasn't trusting her and she was being ignored in the team. And Taco was going to ask Mike, well, hey, I need you to buy me some time instead of messing with the rocket, like she does in the final version of the episode. Instead of her doing that to buy time, Taco threw out there, hey, if Test Tube is suspecting you, I mean, that sucks, but, like, I think the best thing you could do right now is be exactly, like, right into those suspicions and be the criminal that she thinks you are, because that'll get all of her attention on you, and I can go do my thing and get me pad. So just, steal one of her tools right now, just right in front of her, out in the open. And it was a funny idea. It was very all over the top. Microphone's just like, all right, and just dropped all pretense of, like, trying to be subtle and grabbed, like, a tool right out of Test Tube's hand and, like, ran away with it. And Test Tube was like, I knew it, you see, everyone's seeing this, and reacted really big. And, Mike got something deeper out of it, which was that after all this time, she'd been nervously keeping the secret that she was up to no good with Taco. And it kind of felt freeing to just, like, cause mischief out in the open and not worry about the consequences. And then the rest of her story was basically the same as what ended up in the final episode, which is Mike seeing that, Taco's incapacitated Meatpad for his teleportation, and she would warn her against the violence, then there's chaos on the ship. And the story, so it almost worked, right? But the middle just wasn't there. And I realized the problem. This funny scene of Microphone, like, stealing something from Test Tube and running away, and then being like, that was kind of fun. She's having fun doing Taco's bidding. Like, even if it's leaning into the suspicions, it's just not the right beat to hit in the middle of this episode arc. So for her to, like, have fun, like, in any way in the middle, it isn't getting us where we need to be. So we needed to backtrack and make sure that the Mike-Taco partnership at the start of the episode, then it can feel solid there, like they're closer than ever even. And she convinced herself last episode that Taco was going to open up more and change. And then over the course of episode 14, we have to progressively break that down and show that Microphone's realizing, okay, that's not the case. Taco's still on a violent streak, now more than ever. Like, only this time, she's not just attempting or suggesting it. She puts Meatpad in sleep mode. Knife urges Mike to reconsider her involvement with Taco. Mike tries to appeal to morals that she believes Taco has, and then Taco just points a gun at an innocent alien race and totally crosses the line. Because the point of Mike's journey throughout all the episodes so far isn't to get her to a place that she wants to be free of the burden of keeping the secret that she's working with Taco. Like, this is kind of fun. I sort of can, like, just sort of not be stressed about this at this point and, like, have that off my back. No, that isn't what her problem is. Mike has always been struggling with the morality of Taco's actions. Like, you can't paralyze him. We can't push people through a portal into time. We can't let Knife fall off the mine cart and die. And we can't kill Meatpad or shut him down or whatever. No violence. Please stop. And that is what the struggle is. Even before Taco showed up, Mike's been feeling like, ironically, since he's a microphone, she doesn't have a voice. And she isn't being heard. So as a matter of fact, and this was a big writing epiphany, when Mike cuts ties with Taco at the end, she does not divulge the secret that they've been working together to Mephone or the contestants.
I've been listening to this, it was a voice in my head.
Because Mike's story, again, it's not about overcoming the burden of the secret, since that would be a weight lifted off her chest and an action that would make her maybe feel better. But she still cares about Taco enough to not out her like that. So rather, Mike's story is about doing the right thing for everyone as much as she can. The selfless thing, the right thing to do. Mike's been after glory from the contestants she wants respect. She feels like she's not heard. And then she gets it all, everyone cheering for her. But at what cost? It's all hollow because she didn't really stay fan and she's not listening to her heart. And it's not the right thing to do. So another core aspect of this episode I have to touch on, the consistent force of antagonism in Inanimate Insanity, and that's the Meeple Corporation. There was a big question of how exactly we were to incorporate the presence of Meeple and Cobbs throughout this episode, because we knew the major tie-in for sure, which was all the lore about how Meeple fought with this alien species to obtain organic energy from the unborn eggs. We had that figured out. And I won't talk about that much right now, since I can't spoil anything about where that story might go, but I will go into some of the original ideas that we had that we strayed away from. Last episode, we had spent all this time on the contestants seeing visions of Mephone's backstory with Cobbs, right? And I didn't want that to feel like it was set aside. Meeple needed to continue to have a strong presence in the story of this episode, even before you learned how they were relevant to the aliens' backstory. At least that's how I felt, so that, like, it felt, like, consistent and, like, okay, yes, this is the next chapter of the story that we were just hearing. And for a while, we tried this thing where after Fan was abducted by the aliens, pretty overtly in this version, a test tube was assigning roles for how everyone could help in the rescue mission, and she was going to enlist Baseball with, okay, your task is to gather intel. Because test tube reasoned that since everyone saw a vision in Gemery Cave about something with Miphone's past, something with Cobb's, that they should all pool their resources and see if they could find any usable information that might aid them in their mission somehow. And you'd start laying the groundwork of, okay, so then Suitcase, remember she saw that vision of Miphone 3GS playing that recording last time, right? Something about breaking through the shell. What was that other voice on the recording that was saying that? So then later when you meet the Prime Simmer, you'd go, oh, that's who it is. Mystery solved. There you go. And it sounds nice on paper to engage with the lore behind your show so thoroughly, but when you make that the focus, your story starts to become pretty thin because it's more about reflecting on what happened in the past than what's happening now, and why what's happening now is interesting. And then these characters, they just become vehicles to deliver exposition, and they're not going through their own development, which it's important that they do. So all this memory sharing business, it was just taking time away from the characters engaging in more pressing and meaningful interaction with each other. And plus, at this point in the writing process, I was like, okay, Fan, he knows that he's on an alien ship, and he's a flawed character, and he doesn't want to let go of Egg, but I was really struggling with, if he knows this is Egg's family, why would he put up resistance to letting it go to them? Like, what is the juice behind this story? Because he's not that flawed, right? And that's when it hit me, and this was huge. And I think this kind of blew the episode wide open a little bit, or at least it felt that way to me. Instead of just discussing the threat of Meeple in the past, why not make it out to be very much a present and in-the-moment threat in this episode? Why wouldn't Miphone think, if he sees a spaceship, and Cobbs had always talked about how by the end of the day, I'm expecting a spaceship, I want that from you, I want you to make one. Miphone should see a spaceship and be like,
he always wanted a spaceship.
And this is Cobbs looking to collect the egg at any cost, as he made very clear to Fan previously. So Fan would be like, oh, taking the egg, it must be Cobbs, oh my gosh. And then the story became a lot more interesting to me, because now Fan and Test Tube think that they're fighting against Cobbs to do what's right and protect the egg, when in reality, they're the ones keeping the egg from their family, and they've taken on the Cobbs role, and history is perhaps doomed to repeat itself. And then I was like, oh, well then we could do something really interesting with Fan's phone as like kind of a visual, metaphorical journey throughout the episode, right? Because it can break at the start when Fan's getting beamed onto the ship. He can drop it, bam, and then Test Tube will pick it up, and it'll function first as a metaphor for Fan and Test Tube's broken, fractured relationship at that point. But then, when Test Tube brings it on the ship, and the aliens see that symbol, it can really drive the parallel home that they are inadvertently being the meeple in the equation here.
I'm sorry about everything.
And then Fan Test Tube can reject that toxic capitalistic nonsense, and Test Tube can present Fan with a new phone that she made for him at the end. But Taco very much behaves in the violent way that Meeple would have, and comes through very abruptly and aims a gun at the aliens, right? And oh, what's that symbol behind her? Big Meeple logo, emblazoned on the unconscious Meepad she used to get up onto the ship. And this also, it lets Miphone's worst fear, Cobb's coming back to get him, seemingly become reality, and that allows us to bring Miphone to a compelling low point where he can actively consider erasing his memories, just like we found out that he did in episode 13 in the first place. And this will drive away his other assistant. He'll lose his other assistant out of his heightened paranoia and trust issues. And then in realizing, oh, this isn't Cobbs that's the threat, it's no Cobbs, no problem. He could be so relieved that he's back to really fixating and relishing in the more comfy, from his perspective, drama of the reality show competition that he loves to make so much. And he can finally feel like things are back to normal, and he's in control. And I'm sure in the next episode, every other character will agree, and it'll all work out great for him. So before we're done, I just want to give an overview of the general structure of the episode as a guide, because, the structure, you play fast and loose with it. The 3-act structure, it's great. I think it's helpful just to sort of have a sense of if your story is hitting enough beats, and that, like, things are progressing and heightening, and that, like, the characters are driving it forward. they're guidelines as opposed to rules, hard fast rules, and that's what they, they just want to make that clear. But if we're going to look at the episode from a structural perspective, because I do think that this is valuable, and you should never, by the way, write trying to hit the structure like this. It's more just like you're telling the story, and then you can kind of graft onto it after, like, okay, are we moving forward? What is the midpoint? Does this feel right? Do we need to tweak this? Because if you're just like, all right, what's our cut to act 2? It feels manufactured. So, in the beginning of the episode, we start with establishing the current status quo for these characters, and I'll focus on the core ones of this episode. Mainly, Fan is eliminated and missing Egg and Test Tube, generally not being able to handle change very well. That's his status quo. Test Tube has Egg and feels she's best suited to take care of it. Microphone is still listening to Taco, getting up to all these secret shenanigans with her, and Me Phone is done with the show because he feels like it's out of his control. It's all cops. Then, inciting incident, bam, like something blows all of this up to change everything and thrust everyone into the story of the episode. And that's Fan being abducted into the ship, seemingly by Cobbs. So that forces Fan to confront change. Test Tube's forced to take action and leading the charge to save him. Me Phone retreats in horror that his worst fears have come true, and Microphone has to cater to a pitch from Taco to win the challenge. And then midway through the story, you want the core characters to all face a new direction, a point of no return, so to speak. No going back now. All of these reversals need to occur in close proximity to each other, too, and if possible, like, overlap with each other or work to bring everything close together. All the storylines converging, I mean. So, Fan, for, like, individual midpoints of character arcs, Fan hits the midpoint of his arc when the egg hatches. Things will never be the same now. Test Tube hits her midpoint when her ship successfully takes flight to go save him. No going back now. Microphone hits her midpoint when she instinctively, I think, helps save Test Tube's ship from crashing, and realizing she kind of, like genuinely realizes she's happy to have helped the team, and then goes to walk to Taco, maybe to start talking about this, but then gets distracted by the whole "did you murder someone" thing that it's saved for later. And then Me Phone hits his midpoint when he sees that the contestants are seemingly actually able to fight back against an external threat, and that it's not hopeless. He has hope again. So these are all new directions, and they all occur within about a minute and a half of each other, so I'm very proud of that. And then, in the end, the lessons are that Fan learns to accept change, Test Tube learns to be more humble, Microphone learns to be true to herself, and Me Phone learns to not live in fear, though we may have overcorrected a bit on that one, as we'll see in the future. And I think in broad strokes, the act breaks for the overarching plot would be the following. And yeah, I'm playing a little fast and loose with the rules here, since this doesn't match with each individual character. But it's an ensemble piece, and can't ever quite do that exactly. So end of Act 1, Egg hatches, and Fan's wrapped in chains. Midpoint is when we find out the truth about these alien characters' past and the entire story, and how the contestants feel about it is completely turned on its head. Like, the roles are reversed. World-changing. End of Act 2 is Taco shooting Test Tube and Fan. And end of Act 3 is Mike, Test Tube, and Fan all leaving through the elimination portal. So those are some of the stories and meanings behind the process of episode 14 that I can share with you. Hopefully you were able to get something out of this, and that perhaps you found it interesting or helpful in any way. I've been working on Inanimate Insanity since I was in middle school, way back in 2011, so the show's been it's a great learning experience for me, right? It's film school in a box. So if walking you through some of the thought and struggle behind certain creative decisions got you thinking about a story you might want to tell in the back of your mind, I highly encourage you to get creating. There's nothing stopping you, seriously. We were just a bunch of nobodies that started making this, and you keep doing it, and you keep getting better and hone your craft, and you make stuff that you're proud of, and then you make stuff that you're even more proud of as you keep going on and on, So I think you do it. You have the tools to do it. Do it. I tend to analyze art that other people made on this channel and not talk about my own on this channel. So let me know if you're interested in seeing more retrospective stuff like this. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed. Catch you all next time.